Hello, and great to have you back for another informative podcast from the tech world, brought to you by the team at Enqbator. Today's discussion centers around the subject of Headless CMS and all the creative ways companies are making the most use of their website content. And now for today's talk, let's join someone who's been at the leading edge of CMS development in the healthcare industry, Enqbator President and CEO, Sujal Raju. All right, welcome back, everyone, and welcome, Sujal. Good to be back with you.
Thanks, Dave.
Well, obviously today, most of the people using websites out there know what a CMS is, or at least that term, CMS. Today we're going to touch on how the process of managing content is evolving into what's being known more popularly as Headless CMS, or the more recent term for this, decoupled CMS. Well, Sujal, before we get into those modern types and ways to manage your content, maybe we could first get into some history of the CMS. We know that you were among the first to develop content management systems designed specifically for healthcare. Maybe if you could just kind of take us back a little history of the CMS.
Sounds good, Dave. Traditional CMSs evolved, I would say, in the last 20 years. To solve the problem of giving the digital marketers, or anyone for that matter, to publish content easily on the websites or online, tasks that would require a developer to do, back then, was a tedious process because you would have to depend on the availability of the developer, the development team, to publish anything. And obviously, when you have to deploy something really fast, it would take forever, or it couldn't be done in seconds or minutes. So the traditional CMS actually helped that, change the curve a bit, where marketers could actually log in to their CMS and be able to publish content, create pages, create news articles, things like that, and be able to publish right away without having the need for a developer. So it brought a great relief to marketers so that they could have control or be the king of their content and be able to deploy that as and when they need it. So I would say so that's how the CMSs came into the picture and how they were developed. And now, as we know, almost everyone uses it for sure, and it's quite popular.
Right. So talk about your history. I mean, you've like we said, you were among the first to kind of get into this at the ground floor, so to speak, with developing content management systems. So touch on your history a little bit about kind of how you got into it and what type of CMS systems you worked with initially.
Yeah, and I would say so how I gotten involved is so my background is in healthcare, and I've been working with healthcare and healthcare organizations for almost 2 decades now. And when internet came around and it was getting popular, it was considered, a website would be considered as more of a brochureware. So you would put in content to kind of put the word out there as to what your organization does and, your locations, things like that. And as it evolved, it needed or demanded more of online services. So ways for people to get in touch with your brand or your organization. Also, for example, pay bills online, try to schedule a doctor or try to find a physician online, things like that. And so that means that, content was not just traditional brochureware information, marketing, content, but it was more, related to dynamic areas such as physician information, news information, events, and other things. So CMSs, that I got involved in, architected, was more around those areas, but specifically to healthcare, so that the marketing department and other departments which would benefit from this, whether it be the finance department or the donations, philanthropy, other areas, it allowed them different avenues for them to interact with their clients or their consumers and be able to allow them to do that at their own ease. So the CMS that we developed back in early 2000s, I would say that it was probably one of the first ones out there for healthcare, specifically built for healthcare, and it did all of those things that the healthcare organization would need on their website. So and since then, we have engineered the CMSs for what it is today, and I think we're going to talk about some of the fun things that are happening to it, in the last few years.
Right. Well, obviously, new things, fun things, that goes along with our favorite term, buzzwords. So one of the latest buzzwords out there, and one which pertains specifically to this topic rather, is the term headless CMS.
Mm-hmm.
So headless CMS, obviously it sounds fancy. In layman's terms, I guess just how does a headless CMS work?
Sure.
How is it different than your traditional CMS?
Yeah, and talking about the buzzword, I guess the reason it's called headless CMS is if you compare it to a traditional CMS, and if you consider that as a body, then the head of that body is the front-end presentation, so your style sheets, your front-end templates, things like that. So if you decouple those things out of your content, then that becomes a headless CMS. So in layman terms, or in raw terms, that's what a headless CMS is. And so basically what it does is, like, when you author any content, that content does not have those elements that would couple it with a template or is specific to a particular presentation layer. And
content is what we're talking about. Obviously, that's the most important item. We're trying to get content out there to the public, to the customers. And since that first word in CMS, or first letter in CMS is C, content management, first word there is content. So how different can a digital marketer use that content, or use their content, in today's world with these new systems? So what great things, I guess, is a headless CMS going to do for them, and what different ways can they present that content?
Sure. So like I said, like traditional CMSs, it was meant for delivery into one avenue, which would be your website, or maybe a mobile website. And where the internet is going with the smartphones and other Internet of Things devices, you have your smart speakers, your smart cars, your smart devices at home, and all of them, then they all demand content. So our marketer, a digital marketer, or a content publisher now has the challenge of creating content for all of these devices. And it becomes very hard because these devices come in different flavors and sizes. And so how do you create content that is published at all of these areas, and yet be easy for you to manage them? And so clearly the answer is that you can't spend time to create content for each one of them, or copy and paste and try to publish them for each of these devices. So the idea is, and that's where the headless CMS comes into the picture, is that the digital marketer actually creates the content that is only specific to what the content itself is. So meaning it's the skeleton. And with that data that's available, the front-end UI person, I would say, or the developer, could then channel it into different areas, whether it be your smartwatch, or your smart speaker, or digital assistant, or any audio website, or your mobile device, and then publish them or present them into those different presentation layers outside of this. So what allows the digital marketer to do is, like, they create the content, and they can now concentrate just on the content, not have to worry about how it's going to appear or where it's going to go. At the same time, the developer or the team that's responsible to channel it through those different avenues have a way of using that content and publishing it in the best way, the smartest way, into those Internet of Things devices.
So we're talking, coming out of that, I think one thing this is doing is saving time as well. So
absolutely,
efficiency is a big thing going on here.
Right, and it saves. I would say it also affects the dollars factor as well, because it's being done and being used efficiently and repurposed in several different areas. And one of the clients that we have helped with, by the way, since the beginning, our philosophy at Enqbator has always been to be headless CMS, even before it became a headless CMS or the buzzword. And the idea was to be able to use these contents using APIs, just preparing it for the future, because we knew back in 2007, I believe, when the iPhone came out, that you knew that there's all these mobile apps or other things that we are going to head in future. So one of our clients actually is using it to publish content to their digital boards throughout the hospitals. And so it's a smart way, because you're again creating content for the website, let's say, and you're tagging them, and then just by those tags we then decide where it needs to be published. So and that's, I would say, that's the fun part, where what you have developed is now available in areas where you didn't even realize that it could. And it's helping the organization, because otherwise they would have to have another person who would manage content just for those devices. And also it's helping, surprisingly in this one, the caveat was that they're actually allowing departments also to manage those content, in those digital signage devices.
No, obviously, so many good things happening there. The consistency of messaging, branding going on there. But like you said, all of those things, saving time, saving money, all great positive things for marketing departments. Now moving on to a new term, as we continue with our buzzwords here. But the term decoupled. So touch on that a bit for us, and how is that any different than the headless CMS term?
Absolutely. So headless CMS, we've been talking about that a whole lot in the last few years. And now the concept of decoupled CMS comes into the picture. And the reason for that is, if you think about, obviously the traditional CMS, and we talked about how that is to deliver content for a specific need or a specific presentation layer, which most likely was your website. The headless CMS is now saying that, hey, you just concentrate on your content, and then let the development team worry about how it's going to be presented to those different devices. But in a way, headless CMS is more reactive, meaning it manages the content, but then just sits there and then waits for someone to pick it up, through the API. The decoupled CMS is actually a hybrid version of that. So I would say decoupled CMS, headless CMS is actually a subset of the decoupled CMS, because the decoupled CMS is more proactive, meaning when the content is being created, you actually have a way to pick what the presentation layer is going to be, and allows you to actually publish it for it and preview it and things like that. So meaning it's there so that it prepares your content and pushes it into a delivery environment that is existing, and allows you to do that. But at the same time, it is aware that that content could also be used for other avenues. So through the API, you could just take the content part of it, the skeleton, or you could also utilize that content and allow the digital marketer to publish it to a specific presentation layer.
Well, thanks again, Sujal, for another informative talk. A lot of great, important information for marketers out there. Information in situations here that marketers can definitely benefit from. So, as always, you can contact Sujal directly or find out more at Enqbator.com. Sujal, thanks again.
Yep, thank you, Dave. And if anyone wants to read more, we are going to have a blog post on our website pretty soon about this, which details out all of the information around headless CMS and decoupled CMS. So if you want to learn more, feel free to hop on that site and get more information. But pleasure to talk to you again, Dave. Thank you so much for the opportunity, and hope users find this information useful, and everyone adapts to this new technology as it's evolving.